The 2026 economy is fundamentally different than it was 10 years ago. And I believe that this is because of AI. While most media coverage has focused on displacement of workers or corporate productivity, I want to talk about a more indirect but much larger impact on the economy, which is that AI is pushing interest rates higher. I'm Daryl Fairweather, Chief Economist at Redfin, and I think about interest rates all the time because they dictate the cost of a mortgage. But they also have an impact on nearly every corner of the economy and every part of your life, whether you realize it or not. That includes the cost to borrow on a credit card, the cost of getting an auto loan, the cost of getting a mortgage, and the cost that companies pay to invest in workers and research and development. And interest rates are pretty high right now. They're higher than they were during the pandemic or the years before the pandemic. And I'm going to talk about why that is and the role that AI is playing. To understand why interest rates are so high right now, I'm going to bring it back to what I learned when I was a PhD student at the University of Chicago studying economics. So, there are two main drivers of production in the economy. There's labor, which is the work that humans do, and there's capital, which covers everything that humans don't do. That could be machines, it could be AI, it could be land. Capital is everything non-human. The interest rate represents the rate of return on capital. So if a company buys a machine, the rate of return on capital is how much more profit that company will make because they bought that machine. AI is increasing the rate of return on capital. So for example, if a company buys a computer, that computer now is more productive and it increases the profits of that company more because of the AI capabilities that are inherent to that computer. And because the rate of return on AI is so large right now, tech companies are pouring massive amounts of money into building up AI related capital like data centers. They are anticipating a large rate of return on those investments. And as a lender, you want to lend money to whoever is giving you the best rate of return. And lenders are definitely lending money to these AI companies right now to invest in the capital related to AI, such as data centers. But because lenders see that there is this high rate of return on AI investment and they're putting all their capital into that, or a large amount of capital into that, there isn't as much capital left over for the rest of us. This is why it is more expensive to get a loan for everyday things like a mortgage or a car or a credit card. And it's also more expensive for businesses to get small business loans to cover their expenditures. So AI investments, these large AI technology firms, they're kind of sucking up all the capital and there's less capital left for the rest of us. And that capital, because it's more scarce for the rest of us, is now more expensive to obtain through a loan. Now, the 2010s were very different than how the economy is right now. And that is in part due to the rate of return on capital being lower in the 2010s than it is right now. In the 2010s, there was lots of money floating around in the economy, and lenders didn't really have great options for where to put that money. Oftentimes, they were giving out cheap loans to everyday people so that they could borrow to buy a home, or borrow on their credit cards, or borrow to buy cars. And that's why mortgage rates were so much cheaper in the 2010s than they are now. In the 2010s, mortgage rates were at around 4% right before the pandemic. During the pandemic, they dropped down to 3%, and now mortgage rates for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage are at around 6%, much more expensive. So this brings me to a concept called the neutral interest rate. The neutral interest rate is this theoretical interest rate that the Federal Reserve can set where they aren't making the economy hotter and they're not really making the economy cooler. They're just keeping the economy in equilibrium. Now, sometimes the Federal Reserve wants to make the economy hotter because the economy is too sluggish. Like after the Great Recession, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates low because they wanted the economy to recover from that recession. And then during the pandemic, the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates even more because they were worried about the pandemic bringing the economy to a halt altogether. And they wanted to make sure that the economy did not shut down, that it kept operating. So they lowered interest rates even more. But then following the pandemic, there was so much money flowing around in the economy. And as the economy reopened, the economy got way too hot. And that caused inflation. And the Federal Reserve had to increase interest rates above the neutral rate in order to get the economy to slow down. So now that we are a few years out from the pandemic, the Federal Reserve wants to have a neutral interest rate where it's not juicing the economy, it's not slowing down the economy, it's just keeping things in equilibrium. But the Federal Reserve doesn't actually know what the neutral interest rate is. They have to kind of guess based on economic data. And a lot of economists, like Larry Summers, are arguing that the neutral interest rate is fundamentally higher right now than it was before the pandemic because the rate of return on capital is higher now than it was before the pandemic. And I am arguing that the reason that the rate of return on capital and the neutral interest rate is higher now is because of AI. Because AI has fundamentally changed the rate of return on capital investments. So because this neutral interest rate is higher now, that means that all interest rates are going to be higher now. And that includes mortgage rates, that includes credit cards, and it's just going to be more expensive for everyday people to borrow in this economy than it would have been back in the 2010s. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on who you are. High interest rates are bad for borrowers because they have to pay more in order to borrow money. But it's good for savers. If you have your money in a high yield savings account, you are getting a much higher return now than what you would have gotten back in the 2010s. And this creates a K-shaped economy. Savers are, by definition, wealthy. They have money to save. So the wealthy are doing well right now, whereas borrowers, people who live paycheck to paycheck and have to borrow for everyday expenses, are doing worse because it's more expensive for them to borrow. There was research recently that showed that small businesses are having a harder time meeting payroll, meaning that they are missing paychecks for their employees more often. Back when debt was cheap, this wasn't so much of a problem because if a small business didn't have enough money to pay its employees, it could just get a loan from the bank and they would have the money to pay their employees and they could pay it back later. But now because interest rates are higher, those loans are more expensive and it's more difficult for them to pay their employees on time. So the K-shaped economy isn't just impacting wealthy people versus lower income people. It's also benefiting large corporations more than it's benefiting small businesses. If anything, small businesses are hurting because of how much higher interest rates are and the cost of borrowing is high for them. But it's not all bad. Like AI, technological innovation, technological transformation is supposed to be good for the economy. Because when the rate of return on capital is high, that means that the economy is growing. It means that that capital is able to produce more for the economy in the future, which means that in the future, the economy should have a higher GDP. It should be more productive. And that should make future generations better off than we are now. But we're in a transition period right now. The hypothetical rate of return on AI is quite high, but we haven't actually experienced that return on investment yet. Theoretically, in the long run, AI will make firms more productive. It will make all of us more productive, and we will be able to accomplish more at less cost. And that should mean that we will get better goods and services at a cheaper price than what we would have had to pay if there wasn't any AI. But there's also a possibility that this hypothetical return on investment for AI isn't going to pan out. Maybe all of this investment is just a bubble, and this promise of greater return on capital isn't actually going to come. And if it is just a bubble and the stock market crashes, the economy could crash right along with it, and we could all be worse off. That's definitely a big fear. But me personally, I'm pretty bullish on AI. I've been using Claude Code in my everyday work as an economist, analyzing data, and it's pretty amazing how much I can get done now compared to what I would have gotten done before AI. Work that would have taken me days now just takes a few hours. It reminds me of the technological innovation that happened in the first half of the 20th century. Think about the vacuum cleaner. It's this everyday item that we all use, whether you're a household or whether you're a business, that you probably have carpets that need to be cleaned. Before the vacuum cleaner, you would have had to take your carpet outside and beat it with a broom, and it would have taken a long time and required a lot of effort. But with the vacuum cleaner, you just plug it in and move it around the room, and it cleans your carpet. And it's also enabled new kinds of carpet. Now we have installed carpets, which we didn't have before vacuum cleaners. The vacuum cleaner, along with the washing machine and other household appliances, reduced the amount of time that women had to spend on these menial tasks in the household. And it freed up their time to contribute to other parts of the economy, like working for companies, working outside the home. And I think AI is going to be just as transformative. It's hard to think of aspects of the economy that aren't going to be impacted by AI technology. And theoretically, that should make us all more productive and it should make us all better off. But in the short run, it has these unequal effects on the economy where the wealthy are doing much better, their stock portfolios are going up, their savings are yielding higher returns. But people who are worse off, when they try to borrow money, they're paying more to borrow that money, and they haven't really seen improvements in their wages just yet. So they're kind of worse off. So because AI is having these unequal effects on the economy, it's really important that we smooth the transition. We need to make sure that people and firms, small businesses that are being left behind right now, that aren't seeing the benefits just yet, have support. That means increasing the social safety net, making sure that people can still afford their housing, their basic needs. And it also means that we should create more programs for small businesses to access capital when all of that capital is being gobbled up by these huge AI corporations. I'm Daryl Fairweather, Redfin's chief economist. If you'd like to learn more about how the economy is changing and how that impacts you, follow for more.